once we'd chosen the device and everything and we'd finished the assessment process, it was all quite straightforward. We actually got a phone call literally, let me think, the week before Christmas. So we got told there was a possibility of a cancellation on the 23rd, which we wouldn't know obviously until the day before or so. And we were very much, my husband was like, right, okay. We then had the phone call that the little boy was fine, he was going to go for surgery, so we were sticking with the 6th of January, which was absolutely fine, and that came round in no time for us. We came over, because obviously we travelled over from the Isle of Wight on the Wednesday before, because we had his pre-op in Southampton, and he was absolutely fine. He saw it as, I think, as a little bit of an adventure. He enjoyed the playrooms, because obviously they're huge with all the amount of toys in there. He slept as normal, which was very lucky for us. He went down and slept and woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I think he could tell then something was going on. He was like, I've woken up and I'm in a different place, what's going on? So again, because obviously you're trying to stop them from eating and drinking because they're not allowed to at that point, which is incredibly hard because he just kept going after his bag. So I took him out of his room and we went to the playroom, and we were in the playroom for a good probably hour and a half before they then started coming in and putting the cream on his hands for the cannula and everything.
Before she could have the cochlear implant operation, Alyssa had glue ear, so we had to get that cleared first, which meant she had to have grommets, which meant a couple of trips to the local hospital. And then prior to the cochlear implant operation, we had to see the ENT quite regularly to make sure that the glue ear hadn't come back and the grommets were still in. Eventually everything was okay to go ahead with the cochlear implant operation. We had to be in early in the morning to have the pre-op checks, and again to make sure that she was all okay, no illnesses. She couldn't eat or drink anything that morning. I think even the night before she couldn't have eaten or drunk anything from 8 o'clock. So by the morning she was quite hungry, she was getting a little bit grumpy. We had to keep her happy in the waiting room for most of the morning. I think she went down before, late morning, just before lunch. So she was beginning to get very grizzly then.
So the hospital, we had to be there at 6 a.m. that morning. The hardest thing of the whole day was starving Henry, because he liked to eat, he still likes his food. So the journey down was horrendous, but actually was a distraction rather than sat there in silence thinking about the operation. We arrived and we were actually I think because of Henry's age and because they could see how cross he was in the waiting room, we were first on the list. So it all happened quite quickly, which for me was brilliant because I was very, very nervous. We had Mr. Mitchell, our surgeon, and he was just fantastic.
I think on the day Ted was meant to have his surgery a couple of times, but he'd had an ear infection and he'd been ill another time. So by the time we had his surgery date came, we were just so pleased that he was well and it could go ahead. And we went to the pre-op and he was given the all clear and it was the next day. So we were so relieved. And then, so on the day of the surgery, he was going down to Southampton. We went to the 7 or 8 in the morning. Yeah, he's none the wiser about what he was about to undergo. The hospital team were really good. The anaesthetist was so understanding and kind of calm. But we had already, he'd already had a general anaesthetic a couple of times for his grommets and for the MRI scan, so that wasn't so daunting. We knew about him having the anaesthetic and going under.
Had the chat with us. We took him up to the theatre to be put to sleep. And luckily for us that he was the only child going through, so both myself and my husband could go into the theatre playroom with him. And then my husband went and waited by the reception when I took him into the theatre to be put to sleep. And yeah, he took it all quite well. Me and my husband had already made the decision at that point to leave the hospital grounds once he was asleep, because I think we would just be pacing up and down the corridors otherwise and staring at the walls and going crazy. So we left, went and had some breakfast, had a bit of a relax, sat up on Portsdown Hill behind the hospital. So we never went further than sort of a 10-minute drive from the hospital. It all seemed to happen quite quickly. He was in surgery for 4 hours, I think, in the end. We came back into the hospital. We're about to go make ourselves a drink, and the phone rang to say that he was back in recovery. So we both went up and we were both able to go in and collect him. And he just wanted cuddles because he was distressed. I think they'd brought him right round. He's got all these strange faces looking at him. And they'd put, one thing I remember is they put the bandage on his teddy bear, on his rabbit, to match the bandage that he had on his head. Although he didn't like it, so he ripped it straight off. But I thought that was very sweet, the fact that they did that with his cuddly toy.
We knew it was it wasn't a high risk operation, but that it was a very complex operation with putting the wires into the Cochlear. So we were obviously very anxious that time. But she went to sleep and they took her off to the operating theatre, and we waited in the hospital. It took about 2.5 hours to do one side, and they called through to say that they'd done that side and that was all successful. And that, again, it'd probably take about 2.5 hours for the other side. So again, we waited. It was, a horrible time really. Just hoping that things would be okay and that it would all go to plan. Our key contact had been with us that morning, and that was really helpful that we'd been able to ask her any last minute questions that we had, and she was able to help us just with the pre-op checks and settling us into the hospital, which is really nice. We were then told that she was in recovery. We managed to go down and see her when she came out. She had big bandages around her head and big cups on her ears. She looked a bit like Macapaca from In the Night Garden. She was very distressed, very upset, crying. I was relieved to see that she was okay as much as she could be. And we've actually got a photo when we were in the recovery of me sitting on the bed giving her a cuddle, and I was smiling because I think I was just so relieved that it had all been done and she was okay. And there's just her looking very upset and grumpy and sad, obviously very hungry.
They came into the room to call us down. That was difficult, wheeling him down. And we were told it was about 6 hours, and they would call us after the first ear was done, after the first side was done. So we went for a walk. We tried to kill the time. It was difficult. And we went back to the room because it was 3 hours. We waited for this call. And then the surgeon went back to the room. Worst things come into your head because we were never expecting to see him. And I looked and he said, "We're all done." So 3 hours, all done. And I couldn't believe it. He said it couldn't have been more straightforward. So then we saw Henry. He was all bandaged up. He looked like Frankenstein. It was awful. But when he came around, he saw some chocolate buttons on the side and he wanted to eat straight away. And he was smiling. His head was a bit wobbly just because the bandages were so heavy. He couldn't quite sit up.
We were told the surgery could be anything up to about 8 hours, and we had discussed about whether to stay at the hospital, whether to go out. My husband and I decided we just wanted to just be nearby but not stay in the hospital. We just went for a walk down by the harbour, and it had only been about maybe 2.5, 3 hours. They rang and said, they've done one side, it's all going really well, and you can head back to the hospital within half an hour. So that was really nice to get that phone call halfway through. We were told he was coming round, so we went down to get him, and that was really sad seeing him. He was so sad straight after the surgery, and he had the bandages completely over his eyes because it has to be so tight over the ears. And he couldn't see, and you could just see he looked and felt awful. And then he was cuddling one of the nurses, and as soon as I took him, even though he couldn't hear and he couldn't see, as soon as I held him, he immediately kind of calmed down.
He was quite out of it for a little bit. He went back to sleep, very chilled out for a couple of hours afterwards. And then when he was able to eat something, I think the nurse was his best friend. She brought him in some toast and he devoured it. But yeah, the staff in the hospital were amazing, and if he was in pain, if they were able to give him something else, they gave him some extra painkillers. And he seemed to sleep through actually the night after the surgery incredibly well. I was expecting to be up and down with him. And yeah, he woke up and he was all right. The next day when we had the x-rays, it wasn't so easy. My husband went in with him for the x-rays afterwards, and all you could hear was him screaming. He did not like it one bit. But apart from that, we were on the 5 o'clock ferry home that night on the Saturday, and he was running around like a normal toddler.
She spent the night in hospital. She was quite uncomfortable that night, wanting to wriggle around and trying to pull at the cannula, but the ward staff were all very helpful and knew sort of how to manage that and made sure that she was comfortable as much as she could be. The next morning she was back to her usual self. She was trying to walk, she wanted to get out of the bed and walk around. I think the recovery from then seemed very quick. She's a determined little girl and she just wanted to get on with it.
And we had to wait then to have an x-ray to check it had gone in properly. That was done, I think, 7 o'clock the next morning. And then we were sent home. We couldn't believe how quickly we were sent home. And then for about 48 hours at home, we were following him round because we were so worried, like we thought he was going to break. And after 24 hours, he was back to standing on the sofa, wanting to jump off. He was crazy, and I was a nervous wreck.
And then we stayed one night in hospital, and I remember I had a put-up bed next to his bed, and he was just very drowsy and on quite a lot of painkillers. And just in the middle of the night, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning, I just heard him doing these raspberries, which he always used to do. And I thought, yeah, he hasn't lost his sounds. You know, he's getting back to normal. By later that day, first of all, he was just in his cot rolling around, kind of looking at his books, quite happy. And by later that day, he was stood up in the cot, jumping. And so we knew he was kind of getting back to himself.